control test of September 2023. And this is a question paper from Sekukune South District, that is the province of Limpopo. So moving on to our instructions and information, whereby instruction number 1, you have to answer 3 questions as follows. Section A is compulsory, which means you have to answer all the questions that we have in section A. Then section B, you answer any one question from this section. And then section C also, you answer any one of the 2 questions that we have. And section C, obviously, is our essay part. So moving on to the first part of our question, which is section A. Well, the first question that we have, the question reads the distribution of income and assets among countries of the world is called, and of course, we have got various responses that we are given there. We have got a global wealth as the first response, national assets, community income, redistribution. So you see that the correct response that we have is a global wealth, which we have A. So we go to number 2, the percentage of people in a country who can read and write is known as the dash rate. And obviously, this is the literacy rate. So we have literacy, D. So moving on to the next part of our question. The dash is used to measure the standard of living in a country. So you see that what is used is the level of per capita income. So per capita income, we are saying the aggregated income of the whole economy are divided by the number of people that are there in that economy, that is the population, to get the per capita income. So that's what we are having, and then we have A as the correct response. So we go to the next one, number 4. The value of the Gini coefficient ranges between, you see that it ranges between 0 and 1. That is our Gini coefficient. And the Gini coefficient basically is a measure of statistical dispersion intended to represent the income inequality. When we are talking about the representation of income inequality. So that is the Gini coefficient. So moving on to the next question, businesses that offer small loans to people who are unable to get loans from banks are called, so you'd see that these are called micro lenders. So we have A as the correct response. Moving on to the next part, which is going to be 1.2. Choose a description from column B that matches an item in column A. Then column A, we're given B. Terms that were given in column A that has to match the descriptions that we have in column B. So obviously, this is going to be our column B. So in terms of that, we have the first term, which is per capita income, which we've described earlier, and try to check which explanation determines the per capita income. So if you go to our column B, we have got various responses that we have going down. So if you go to E, say gross national product divided by population. So it's going to give you the per capita income. So we have E as the correct response. Then we have got capital, which one best describes capital. So if you go to D, it refers to the financial resources and production equipment. So this represents capital. So we have D, the most appropriate that we have. Then we've got a stock variable. So in terms of stock variable, we try to check again according to responses given. So it's going to F as the measure of wealth at a particular point in time. F is the appropriate explanation that we have. Then we move on to the next part, which is the Human Development Index. So Human Development Index, you'd see that we go down again to see which one. If you go to G, a measure of a country's average achievements in 3 basic aspects such as health, literacy, and living standards. So we have G as the correct response. Then we go to the repo rate. So in terms of the repo rate again, we check which explanation matches a repo rate. So repo rate is a percentage at which the central bank lends money to the other bank. So we have A as the correct response. Then we've got the fiscal policy. And we know that fiscal policy is a policy implemented by the government, and it uses mainly two instruments, that is government expenditure and taxation. So we check again which branch is that. So if you go to C, regulation of tax collection to finance state expenditure. So C is the correct response. So this is the last part that we have in terms of our matching section. So moving on to the next section, whereby we're going to look at 1.3. So 1.3 reads, give one term each of the following descriptions. Write all the term next to the question number. So we've got the first part, a statistic used to rank countries by level of human development in terms of set criteria. So you would see that this is the Human Development Index. So we can include it as the. So Human Development Index 1.3.2, a body of language skills and technology which belongs to a particular geographic or community is indigenous and knowledge systems. So that's what we have on that part. Then the 1.3.3, a sustained increase in the general price levels and decline in the buying power of money. So this is inflation. 1.3.4, the expenditure of capital goods with the aim of generating income is investment. So this is what we have on section A. So moving on to our next part, which is going to be section B. So section B, we start with question 2, which is on economic growth. It's got 40 marks and it expects you to spend on average 30 minutes. So the first question is, name N2 development policies that have been implemented in South Africa since 1994. So you see that in terms of the development policies, you can include the National Development Plan, which is the NDP, and also we have the new growth plan, growth path. Is also another policy that you can include in terms of 2.1.1. So of course we have those stated in the other section. So as we have the mentions on this part. As we have the first one is Reconstruction and Development Program, which is the RDP. And also we have got Growth Employment and Reconstruction, which is the GEAR. Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative for South Africa. A National Development Plan. We've got the New Growth Plan, New Growth Path. So these are some of the development policies that were implemented in South Africa since 1994. So of course, the question only requires two. So we go to the next part, which says, how does the size of the population affect the standard of living? So it's that if the population increase at a faster rate than the gross domestic product, there will not be any improvement in the standard of living as per capita income will drop. And we move on to the next part. Next part is 2.2. It is study the graph below. Study the graph below and other questions that follow. You're given a graph of South Africa's real GDP growth rate. So you just need to go through the graph that you are given, and then below that, it is identify the period in which growth in real GDP is the lowest. So we check where growth GDP is the lowest according to our graph. So we can just try to go through a graph and try to identify where exactly. So if you check we check on this part are going down, we are going to see that we have got a zero at this point. So going down is a negative. And then if you go up, it indicates a positive. So basically, according to the lowest part, we see that the negative part is going to represent the lowest part, whereby we have something like negative 50 at this point, which is at 2020, which is the first part of 2020, which we can represent as the uh, first part of 2020, or this part. So we are going to indicate it as such. So we can just indicate it as the second quarter of 2020, at where we have uh, the negative change that is indicated on the second quarter of 2020. So we are saying the answer that we have in terms of 2.2.1 is second quarter of 2020. Then we go to 2.2.2, name an economic indicator that is used to measure economic growth. So you see that economic growth, we can use real GDP. So moving on to the next question, which is going to be our question at 2.2.3. Please briefly describe the term economic growth. But basically, whenever there's economic growth, there is a comparison that we are making from the previous period to the current period. So when there is an increase in the total monetary value of the goods that are being produced from the last period to the current period, it indicates that there is an economic growth. Basically, economic growth, it is an increase in the production capacity of a country. So that indicates economic growth. And then our next question is saying, explain factors that can lead to increased economic growth. So what factors can activate the economic activity, can activate in terms of increasing economic activity? We can have an increase in capital investment as a factor, as one of the factors that we can include. Moving on, we can also have increased labor productivity as a factor, and then improvement in technology also. So on the next question now, 2.2.5, why is South Africa experiencing low economic growth rate and levels? So basically, the question is asking you causes of a low economic growth rate. So obviously, when we have a low economic growth, we are saying the rate at which our goods are being produced in the country is reduced. And what can be the cause? So South Africa is experiencing a low economic growth levels because of the overvaluation and volatility of South African currency. So that's what we have. And then we have got an inadequate national infrastructure also. So remember, when we have get inadequate national infrastructure, it means we've got bad transportation systems, which is going to affect foreign direct investment, whereby we are seeing foreign investors they don't come and open their businesses in our local economy because they see that our infrastructure is not up to scratch. So those are some of the reasons why we can experience low economic growth rate. Then in terms of overvaluation and volatility of South African currency, we are saying if our currency is being overvalued, it means our exports also are going to go down. The demand of our local products that are from by the foreigners is going to go down, as they need more units of our currency to buy our currency. Yeah, so in that case, it's expensive for them to buy the local currency so that they can buy the goods that are being produced in the local economy. So from that point of view, the demand of our locally produced goods will go down. So in that case, it will lead to low economic activity, which is finally going to lead to low economic growth. So this is what we have. Then on the next point, shortage of skilled labor can also be a point that we can also include. And then we've got barriers to entry, limits to competition, and limited new investment opportunities. So this is what we have. Then lastly, we've got the deficiencies in the state organization capacity and leadership. So this can lead to low economic growth rates. So with that, we'll move on to the next part, which is now our 2.3, which is on data response. So our 2.3, read study the graph below and answer the question that follow. So you've got a Lorenz curve that you are given that you just need to go through. So you see that we have at the line of equality, and then we've got the Lorenz curve. And then, of course, we've got an A, which is a space that we are having between a line of equality and Lorenz curve. And then on the horizontal axis, of course, we've got cumulative population percent, and then vertical axis, we've got cumulative income percentage. Then 2.3.1 reads identify the area labeled A. So we have got A, and we see that A is in between our line of equality and the Lorenz curve. And obviously, this represents the area of inequality. So basically, we are saying this is the area of inequality. So with that, we move on to the next question, which is saying, what percentage of income is received by 80% of the population? What percentage of income is received by 80% of the population? So you'd see that if you check according to the information given, you'd want to refer to see what is the percentage. So we have our 80% here, which is being indicated by this line. So if you go up, you are going to see that if we start here and then we go up, you see that it's going to end here. And then we go this way to check which income percentage is that. So if you come here, you see that we've got an in between 40 and 60, which is going to indicate that this is our 50. So basically, we're talking about 50%. And then moving on to the next question. It reads, briefly describe the term wealth, but we can describe wealth as the value of the assets of wealth. So the value of the assets of wealth accumulated over time. So that is a description of wealth that we can give. So moving on, you'll see that we also have our description is wealth is the value of all assets of wealth accumulated over time and owned by individuals, businesses, or government. So basically, that's what we have. The next part explains the meaning of the position of Lorenz curve. The more the Lorenz curve deviates from the line of equality, the more uneven is the income distribution in the country and vice versa. Then we go to the next one. How does the Lorenz curve relate with the Gini coefficient? So the Gini coefficient, remember, we have described it as a measure of statistical dispersion intended to represent the income inequality. So basically, that's a description of Gini coefficient. So the question says, how does the Lorenz curve relate to the Gini coefficient? The Gini coefficient information is used to draw the Lorenz curve. And if a country income distribution is almost equal, the Lorenz curve will be closer to the 45-degree line, and the Gini coefficient will be lower. So these are some of the points in terms of the relation that exists between the Lorenz curve and the Gini coefficient. So moving on to the next part, which is 2.4, discuss the importance of economic growth. We have described economic growth. So what is the importance? So economic growth generates income for government through tax revenues that can be used to fund infrastructure and social services. And also, when there's economic growth, it means there is more economic activity. And of course, businesses are producing more. And by producing more, they accommodate more workers. So we are saying jobs opportunities are created when there is economic growth. People's standard of living may improve because of income they earn from jobs when there is income, when there is economic growth. So these are some of the points that we can include. Then we go to 2.5. How can the South African Reserve Bank stabilize the value of money? Obviously, we know that by stabilizing the value of money, it's going to be through the monetary policy. And of course, the monetary policy, we are making use of the instruments that are used around the monetary policy, that is mainly the interest rates. So we are saying the Reserve Bank can increase interest rates when the inflation rate is high in order to discourage people from taking out loans or buying on credit. We have got further points that we can also include that are also correct on 2.5. Then, of course, from there, we move on to the next question, which is to our question 3. So our question 3 is on money and banking. So the first question reads, name any two money associated instruments. So we can talk about postal orders, traveler's checks, debit cards, credit cards are some of the money associated instruments, but the question only requires two. So we have checks, debit cards, credit cards, traveler's check, postal orders, electronic funds transfer. So we'll move on to the next part whereby saying how can overprinting of money have a negative impact on the economy? So when there's overprinting of money, obviously we have money that is more money that is going to be injected in the circular flow. So when we have such a scenario, we are going to have it's going to activate demand, and demand will increase, and it's going to lead to a demand pull inflation. So in that case, that would be a negative impact on the economy as we are going to see prices going up. So that is what we have in terms of 3.1.2. So we check in terms of the explanation that we have, which reads, overprinting of money may cause inflation if it is not accompanied by economic growth. And there will be too much money chasing a few goods. So that is the explanation that. So 3.2, it starts the following graph and answer the questions that follow. We are given interest rates. So you see that we have got the line for headline CPI, and then we've got the repo rate. So we try to see according to information that we have. And then we go to 3.2.1, name the institution that manages the repo rate. And we know that this is the South African Reserve Bank, which is the SARB, South African Reserve Bank. So the central bank is in charge of managing the repo rate. The second part is saying in which year was the headline CPI at its lowest? CPI at its lowest. So you go to our graph, you see that we've got CPI, which is headline CPI is indicated here. And indicated by a darker line. So you see that this is our CPI. So check where is it at its lowest, and you see that it's at this point. And then we can see that this is January 2020 is indicated. So here is 2020. So it is in the year 2020. So that's what we have on that part. Then moving on to the next question that we have, which is now going to be 3.2.3. So 3.2.3 reads, describe the term repo rate. So basically it needs you to describe a repo rate. So we are saying repo rates it's the rate at which the Reserve Bank lends money to commercial banks. So remember, banks also would need funding. So when they need funding, they go to the central bank. So the rate at which they are charged that money that is being lended to them is the repo rate. So we have that brief description in the other section, as we are saying. It is the rate at which the Reserve Bank lends money to commercial bank in the event of a shortfall of funds. Then the next question reads, what was the cause of the decline in headline CPI and repo rate in January 2020? So we saw that in January in 2020, that's where we had the lowest level of headline CPI. So what was the cause? What do you think? The decline was due to a lockdown as a result of COVID-19. Remember, 2020, that's when we had a lockdown due to COVID-19. Then the next part, how does credit creation work? So credit creation, banks accept deposits from the public and keep a certain minimum amount in cash reserves, which is required by law. And the amount that they keep is called the reserve requirement ratio. And then we go to the next point. This is the money that should be available at all times to meet the cash requirements of its clients. And we have got also further points that we can also include in terms of that. So moving on to the next part, which is 3.3. Start the following picture below and answer questions that follow. We are given the picture of South African banks. So this is the picture that we have. So of course, it's indicating South African banks as we are seeing. We go down, it says how many major banks are there in South Africa? How many major banks are there in South Africa? So you see that according to information given, you see that we have got 4. And then we are saying, mention any one major bank in South Africa. We can talk about Standard Bank. We can talk about Nedbank and First National Bank also as examples of banks that we have. So these are the banks that we have. We can talk about ABSA, Standard Bank, First National Bank, and Nedbank. Then in terms of the next question that we have, it reads, briefly describe the term legal tender. So legal tender is money that is accepted by law as the means of payment for goods and services. And then 3.3.4, why is SARB, which is South African Reserve Bank, having the sole right to issue bank notes? So these are the reasons: to avoid different types and size of paper money, to maintain the uniqueness of the note, to maintain control through government legislation, to maintain international standards in terms of foreign exchange. So these are the points that we have. So on the next question, which is 3.3.5, how will a cut in interest rates influence consumer spending? So when the interest rates are cut, it means it's now cheaper to borrow. So we have cheaper access to money. So we are going to see that demand is going to be activated. So we're saying a cut in interest rates will result in the commercial banks lowering the prime lending rate. A lower prime rate encourages people to borrow more, increase the amount of money available for spending. Spending on goods and services also increasing. So the spending is determining the demand. So basically, that's what we have on 3.3.5. Then, of course, 3.4, discuss the aims of the monetary policy. Remember, we said the monetary policy is a policy that is set by the central bank, and we have the South African Reserve Bank that we have in the local economy. And then the aims of the monetary policy, obviously, is to control the money supply, and then also control economic activities. Then we go to the first point, is saying to protect the value of the currency in order to ensure economic growth. And then also to control money supply and credit levels to the advantage of both consumers and businesses, to manage stable conditions in the financial sector so that banks don't face the risk of failure, to establish interest rates that will encourage investments and savings, but are affordable to those who want to borrow. So basically, these are the points that we have. Then 3.5, how is economic development measured? So this is how it is measured. The United Nations Development Program uses Human Development Index to measure the economic development of countries by compiling the following statistics. So these are the statistics that are compiled: life expectancy, health, education. So this is what we have in terms of our question 3. And of course, from there, we are supposed to move on to the next question. That is our question 4. So, Ono is a part, question 4 is on economic growth. Consists of 40 marks, requires you to spend on average 40 minutes. So the first part is to discuss in detail the different methods used to redistribute income and wealth with 26 marks. And then the additional part is analyze the causes of uneven distribution of income in South Africa with the 10 marks. So remember, this is an essay. You are supposed to start with the introduction. So on the introduction, you can define any key term that we have in the question. Of course, we have got redistribution of income that we can define in the introduction. Then from there, we go to the main part, whereby this is going to be the main part of discussing in detail the different methods are used to redistribute income and wealth. And then on the additional part now, that is the last part, we look at analyzing the causes of an uneven distribution of income in South Africa. Then lastly, obviously, we have to end with your conclusion. And of course, you are going to start with your introduction. So basically, this is how we are going to go about it. So remember, in the introduction, we said we can define any key term which we've identified as redistribution of income. So this is the description of redistribution of income that we have. Redistribution is a process of reallocating income, wealth, and resources equally amongst the citizens to reduce social and economic inequalities. So in terms of the main part now, we are discussing in detail the different methods used to redistribute income and wealth. So these are what we have. Taxation is one of them. So this is what we have on taxation, and then we move on to the next one, which we have, which is social grants or cash benefits. That is a method used to redistribute income. Then we've got also payments in kind. which we have the explanation on the next page in terms of payments in kind. And then moving on, we also have education, labor practice, redress policies. So we also have a Black economic empowerment. So from Black economic empowerment, we have land restitution and land redistribution. So this is what we have. And as a continuation of our response to the answer, we also have property subsidies as a method of redistributing income. Then we go to the additional part where we have to analyze the causes of uneven distribution of income in South Africa. So, uneven distribution of income exists because of a lack of education and training, unequal ownership of resources of wealth, family sizes, discrimination. So these are the points that we have. So we can also include culture and personal preferences of a certain type of work. Then we'll talk about the next point. We've got other points that are also correct that we can also include. Then lastly, you are supposed to end with your conclusion. Then lastly, go to your conclusion. So this is a typical conclusion that we come up with according to our question 4, which is our essay part.